The Imperial Army uses a very diverse set of weaponry and equipment, some new, some old, some given the baptism of fire that was the War of the Red Sands. And while yes, I have covered lots of weapons across multiple episodes, I think it's time for a more detailed and streamlined recap. Hi, I'm your host Heatwave, and in today's lore episode, I'll be exploring the current Imperial Armory of the Imperial Army. Our enemies don't carry bayonets. They are scared by them. By fixing our bayonets, the Inductii will want to close in and attack. Only the threat of closing in will defeat a determined enemy. Welcome back to the Wings of Fire spin-off series Empire of Purina. If you haven't done so already, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe so you never miss any episodes that I publish. So in today's lore episode, I'll be exploring the Imperial Armory, from the humble Laz Arm to the colossal Earthshaker. Over the course of covering the Imperial Army, I have discussed and described many different weapons, both current and former, but I've never had the time to explain these weapons in depth. Their individual history, how a dragon can use them, and how they hold up in battle. So here in this lore episode, I'll run through all the current in-service weapons used by the Imperial Army. I did say current though. I will not be covering weapons that are out of service or weren't used during the War of the Red Sands. If you'd like to see what arms were used in the past for the Imperial Army, I recommend viewing my episode on the history of the Imperial Army. This episode will also only cover small arms used by the Imperial Army, and the tactics Inductii used with these weapons. A part 2 will follow, discussing heavy weapons and large caliber weapons. So, the first question is, where do the weapons come from that arm the Imperial Army? Well, the Department of Military Affairs is allocated a sum of the Imperial Treasury. This gold is used to buy contracts and production orders. The department will observe and record the need for new weapons and equipment. They then place an example order, inviting the manufacturers to create an example product for testing. If approved, the funds will be issued and production of the new weapons will hit the assembly lines. The two largest manufacturers of arms and weapons of the Imperial Army are the Imperial Locomotive Company, who mostly builds tanks and other large weapons, and the Sea Salt Armory, named after and founded by the first dragon to develop an artillery weapon. I speak more about her in my episode on Imperial Artillery. All weapons that are produced are tested in their factories, produced alongside any ammunition required, crated up and then sent to the storehouses and catacombs under the Imperial Palace, waiting to be issued to the Imperial Army. All weapons are produced in 3 sizes to allow for each winglet to carry these weapons, but caliber stays the same. Unfortunately, it was hard for Mudwings to load small ammunition with those big talons. So I'll start with the smallest of small arms, and that brings us to the old issued sidearm of the Imperial Army, the Sea Salt Armory Light Armament. Yeah, that's a mouthful, so troops simply called it the M1 sidearm. When the Imperial Army adopted the first field guns in 1510, artillery crews had to lug around not only the gun, the ammunition, but their small arms for self-defense. With a new uniform change in 2003, a new semi-automatic rifle was being issued to Inductii, but artillerymen were to receive a new, different weapon, that being the M1 sidearm. The idea was that this small arm was light and, well, small enough to be carried with all the other bits of kit without compromising on self-defense. The weapon would be issued to officers, specialists, and engineers as well. The sidearm was milled from a solid block of steel, making it actually quite heavy. The operation of this weapon was pretty simple. A long charging handle is pulled back, a simple hammer operation allows for the firing of a bullet. The M1 fired a 9mm cartridge, the only Imperial weapon to do so. It was fed by a 10-round box magazine slotted into the magazine well in front of the trigger. The magazine release is a small pull tab under the magazine. The sidearm is semi-automatic, using a small blowback spring to cycle the next round by pushing the charging handle back. The M1 would be later replaced by the LAZ sidearm in 2089, but while it was out of production and out of service, it was still used. Issued in large numbers to border guard troops due to how cheap it was also carried by some inductii during the War of the Red Sands. These sidearms were usually family heirlooms, but since inductii are not issued with a sidearm, they were still a welcome addition to any arsenal. In 2089, LAZ technology would come into service within the Imperial Army. The LAZ sidearm replaced all other small Talon-held firearms across the Imperial Army. It was issued to officers, tank crews, and non-essential combat personnel, including law enforcers. The LAZ sidearm uses the same technology as the LAZ arm, but scaled down into a smaller, lighter package. The magazine is interchangeable between the weapons. The barrel and internals are exactly the same as a LAZ arm. A magazine release latch is located on both sides of the weapons. There is a sight post built into the casing. The trigger folds back into the grip with a large grip end that can be used as a bashing weapon. The grip end also features an O-ring to allow a lanyard to be mounted to the weapon. The LAZ sidearm was light and its ammunition was easily carried. It carried the same stopping power as a LAZ arm, just with a shorter range. Unlike the LAZ arm, the LAZ sidearm has a mesh cloth covering over the grip. Now, how would a dragon use these sidearms? Well, first, a sidearm is very useful to a dragon. It's small and can easily be mounted to the body in a simple holster. It's small enough to be carried in the confines of a tank, for example. Due to its small size, it can be shot in one talon. This allows a dragon to use the other talons to hold other objects, use hand signals to direct troops. Firing from one talon still also allows a dragon to be mobile, allowing them to awkwardly walk on only 3 limbs. It can also be used in flight, but it's not an official Imperial Army tactic. Next are rifles. The ballistic rifle of this era is the RM-1 carbine. This rifle was first issued in 2003, yet solid-shot rifles have been in active Imperial Army service for a lot longer, but the RM-1 was the first semi-automatic rifle to be used. It features a thin stock, a large muzzle brake adorning a high front sight post leading back to a tri-sight at the rear. The trigger guard is protected by a large metal frame, with the integrated magazine before it. The RM-1 fired a 7.62mm cartridge fed by 2 5-round stripper clips. These clips are loaded through the top breech down into the internal magazine. The rifle features a gas blowback rod mounted under the front furniture, but the blowback feature was prone to failing, so a simple design feature was added to prevent this. After the first 5 rounds have been shot, the bolt is pulled back to eject the spent stripper clip. This helps empty the gas rod of any buildup and resets it. When the bolt is closed back up, it introduces the next 5 rounds into the chamber cycle. The bolt is tall and jets off to the right-hand side of the rifle. The bolt is mounted on a rail system that, when pulled back far enough, locks into place, but it was still delicate as the bolt and cover could snap forward, catching any unfortunate talon. The rifle didn't play well in sand or wet conditions, causing failures in a lot of the moving parts of the weapon. That doesn't mean that it was not an effective weapon. A 7.62mm round can drop a Groznian soldier in a single shot to the chest. This weapon was phased out of service by 2089, but the Border Guards were issued this rifle, and while they didn't put up much of a fight, this weapon did carry them through. In 2089, the LAS Arm, or the Sea Salt Armory ILA simply stands for Infantryman's Laser Armament, but it's commonly just called the LAS Arm, was first given to the Imperial Army, described as a weapon with no ammunition, incredible accuracy at long range, and enhanced stopping power. Laser technology is kind of misunderstood in Purina. Its origins come from simple experiments using light, bending light, or focusing light into narrow cones. But the experiments revealed that whatever the light hit, it would superheat the area, even to the point of ignition. The first lasers were actually invented in 1904, but due to limited portability, because it needed direct sunlight to focus the beam, the weapon was scrapped almost as soon as it was shown off. But development continued privately until 2060, when the Sea Salt Armory bought the production rights to this new laser weaponry. They perfected it and then sold it to the Imperial Army in 2089. I'll start with how this weapon actually works. Along the barrel are a number of crystal focusing lenses that lead down to a small ruby red gem just before the firing chamber. Behind the firing chamber is a hammer mechanism. Above the barrel is a vent rod assembly leading to a right hand facing charging handle. Now the LAS arm fires a long beam of superheated light about 12 millimeters in diameter. The beam is short-lived, appearing only for a fraction of a second before disappearing after losing all of its energy. A target hit with this beam has all of the heat energy transferred into it, causing it to melt light metals and boil away flesh. This is because as the beam travels the length of the barrel and is stretched out, the electrical current becomes superheated. The beam has an effective reach of about 800 meters. Mounted before the trigger guard is the weapon's power supply, a large battery box magazine made of a very special metal called lethanine. Sometime in the early 2000s, this simple metal was mined in the Mojave and it appeared to be like any other metal. But when exposed to UV radiation, basically the sun, the metal was able to capture that energy given off. And when struck by a hard object, like a hammer, it released off a spark of this energy. Experiments were then conducted to see if the energy can be focused into a beam. The ruby red gem mounted in the weapon actually acts as a tracer. It essentially stains the beam red, allowing it to be seen when firing. The magazine is essentially a large lithium block encased in steel, with a small red service light to the right face of the magazine. If the red light is bright, it means the magazine is charged up, but dulls over time when shot. The magazine can hold enough ammunition for about 100 to 200 shots. And of course, the battery can be recharged by putting it out in the sun, creating an almost unlimited source of ammunition. The weapon is semi-automatic. When the trigger is pulled, a small hammer hits the lithanine, creating a spark, which is focused and forced down the barrel length. The hammer runs on its own reciprocating spring system. The trigger needs to be released to re-engage the hammer as it's pushed back by the spring system. On the outside, the outer casing is made of a dual layer of stamped steel with wooden furniture. There is a bayonet mounted under the bulky barrel and a long stamped steel sight hood over the internal iron sights. The LAS arm, though, wasn't without its flaws. If the beam comes into contact with any airborne dust, sand, or raindrops, it can lose some of its thermoenergy, as it essentially burns through these particles in the air. And at its max range, it also loses some of its thermal energy through flight. But the biggest problem is the residual heat. As the beam is fired, some of the heat produced by the laser is retained in the weapon casing that forces the focusing crystals to expand, becoming less accurate over time. There is a charging handle mounted to the right of the weapon that is used to open the venting valve above the barrel because, well, hot air rises into this valve. Upon pulling the bolt back, it creates an opening and pushes all the hot air out. After every reload, or after at least 25 shots, hot air should be dumped out of the weapon. Of course, this doesn't stop the battery from cooking off or any unexpected and unexplained misfires. Now, there are a few different makes and models of the Imperial Lazarm. From 2089 to 2135, the M1 Lazarm was in service, and it looked exactly as it should. In late 2135, the M1A1 configuration was written into service. The only difference was the sling. In the early war, it was observed that the sling and the way an inductee carried his Lazarm slowed his response in combat, so a new sling was issued where at its center was a special micromagnet clip that allowed the sling to open at the center to be removed quickly before snapping back together, because it's a magnet. For long-distance marches, though, there are two latches to help lock the magnet in place, meaning that if an inductee is flying for a long time, their rifle just doesn't fall off them. In late 2137, the M1A2 was introduced. The only distinct feature was an added carry handle on top of the weapon. In 2100, a las carbine was issued to artillery crews, and later it was issued to tank crews. It's a standard Lazarm except for a folding stock, which is folded up over the sight hood. There is also a variant of the Lazarm that features a telescopic sight, which was only issued to snipers after 2136. There, of course, is the multi-laser. Mounted coaxially to the 152mm main gun of an Imperial tank, this version of the Lazarm is mounted in a special housing, allowing the weapon to fire fully automatic, but due to the massive amount of heat buildup, the laser is wildly inaccurate. So how does a Dragon fire a rifle? A sidearm is easy as it can be carried in one talon, but rifles require both talons to use. Let's discuss that. When an inductee first enters an engagement, they would immediately drop or dive to their tummies as fast as possible, because when the bullets start flying, making yourself as small as possible reduces the chance of being hit. By lying on their bellies, an inductee can brace his weapon in both talons, allowing him to aim down his sights. The inductee's aim will be guided by their section leader or platoon leader, relaying where the inductee should be shooting. Their primary action is to suppress the enemy, allowing for the movement of the rest of an infantry platoon. While their goal is to suppress, if given the option, an inductee will always shoot to kill their target. Each inductee is trained to utilize overlapping fields of fire. This is where they will not individually target one enemy, but shoot at whatever is within their field of view, catching the enemy in a crisscross of lasfire. If the inductee comes under immediate return fire, the inductee will roll left or right to avoid enemy fire. If in a prolonged firefight, the inductee may be ordered to dig in with a hasty foxhole. Inductee are expected to still be somewhat mobile while prone, crawling from position to position. One talon is still always holding the Lazarm. The other talon is used to help crawl forward, with their tail propelling them forward, like how a snake moves. I will say this though. Usually, dragons will always shoot with their right talon. Now for something a little more archaic, and that is the two types of issued combat blades given to the Imperial Army inductee. The Model 1 bayonet and the Model 1 combat dagger. I know, great naming system on the Empire's behalf. But the bayonet is actually the primary form of death dealing done by the inductee. In close combat, there is no running, no hiding. It's either fight or die trying, and a dragon, physically faster, stronger, and in some cases can use their bodies as natural weapons, well, It seems a talon-to-talon combat is something the dragon wins over all who dare face him. The Model 1 bayonet is fitted to the Imperial Lazarm. It's long with a single-edged blade with a sawback. It was designed to be used in multiple thrust movements. The bayonet is bolted to the Lazarm muzzle, but some Inductii have created talon-stitched covers for their bayonets for safety reasons. Carried on the waist of every Inductii is his Model 1 combat dagger. Mounted in a metal case, the pointed, double-edged blade is designed to kill in one strike. Its blade gives an Inductii more control in close combat, as well as being an effective backup weapon. Imperial Army commandos use this blade to great effectiveness, being able to dispatch a dog in one slice. It could even go through a Groznian soldier's helmet. Now, tactically, the Inductii was extensively trained on how to perform in close combat, using everything at their disposal: bayonet, knife, and sometimes their own bodies. When using a bayonet, the Inductii will choreograph 4 effective maneuvers. The first is a forward thrust. After charging into contact, the Inductii will reel back, balancing on their wings or tail, to then violently thrust forward, with the bayonet going first into the target. The Inductii can then perform this action multiple times, introducing multiple stab wounds into the target, or, if they are big enough and strong enough, can lift their target up in one swoop and let them slide down the bayonet further. The second maneuver is a shoulder charge or tackle that pushes the target onto their back, grappling with the Inductii. The Inductii will then bayonet into the enemy's abdomen, rupturing organs and causing massive internal bleeding, and they may even open the abdomen, leading to a most graphic death. The third maneuver is a lot like the first, but instead of a forward thrust, the Inductii levels their Lazarm horizontally to swing in a slashing movement, aiming to slice across the enemy's neck. In some rare accounts, this maneuver could even decapitate. The final bayonet maneuver is simply to trip one's opponent with their tail before leaping down onto them using a downward thrust to build momentum and stabbing the bayonet into the exposed neck area. Now, these are just a few ways how an Inductii is trained to handle a bayonet. Their combat dagger is a little different. It's designed to deal a blow that would outright kill in one strike. But a common practice would be to interrupt or incapacitate their enemy before making a swift strike. For example, an Inductii could step on a paw, stab the thigh to disorganize their enemy before thrusting up into the jaw, confirming the kill. Next, we'll discuss the Inductii's individual ordnance. Now, only one piece of equipment was actually produced by the Empire Purina that is based upon a grenade technology, and that would be the Model 1 thermite grenade. Hand grenades were, of course, a SSG development, but before Operation Fractured Jaw, these grenades were issued to aid in attacking tanks and weapon emplacements. Painted white with an orange band, this cylinder fits comfortably into a dragon's talon. The grenade is easily operated. A single pin holds the fuse latch. When removed, it initiates the impact fuse. Upon striking a target, the grenade would detonate in a small explosion, throwing thermite over the target area, burning, melting, or welding tank armor. The thermite anti-tank grenade lacks real explosive stopping power, but its effectiveness comes from the fact it's small enough to be stuffed into weak points on enemy walkers like legs, the engine, or the middle section, gun mantlets even. The thermite grenades are better used to strip away a tank's ability to fight back, forcing the crew to abandon their useless vehicles. Of course, sometimes an Inductii gets lucky, and the tank goes up in a massive fireball as its ammunition cooks off. And that concludes another lore episode of the Wings of Fire spin-off series Empire of Purina. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. This has been your host Heatwave, signing off.